The first thing Zane Strayer felt when he woke was the cold. Not the sterile chill of a hospital room or the metallic bite of a cryo chamber, but something deeper, like the air itself was stitched with frost. He blinked, one eye crusted shut, and pushed himself up from the cot. The walls around him shimmered faintly, not quite solid, as though they were more of a suggestion than a structure. He was not on Earth. A low hum vibrated under his feet, steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a machine the size of a city. The ceiling pulsed with a soft blue glow. He squinted, trying to orient himself. Subject Zane Strayer. Breathe normally. The voice was mechanical, but not unpleasant. It came from a wall panel that displayed no speaker or interface. Yeah, okay, Zane muttered. I've had weirder wake-ups. He stood, wobbling slightly, the muscles in his legs unsure of gravity. He rubbed the side of his neck, feeling the telltale pinch of a recently removed foreport. Then right on cue he felt it. The familiar crash. His blood sugar was tanking. He fumbled inside the pocket of his cargo pants, found the tiny case, and pulled out the injector. The door to his room creaked open before he could press the plunger. A tall, feather-skinned alien stepped through the doorway. Its eyes were wide, round, and completely black, like two oil drops floating in snow. It moved with deliberate grace, each step accompanied by a faint rustle of its cloak. Zane didn't wait. He uncapped the injector, jammed it into his stomach, and pressed the button. The hiss of insulin was barely audible, but the alien flinched. What was that? It asked, voice echoing in the room unnaturally. Zane exhaled slowly. It's just insulin. The alien did not respond. Instead, it turned and left the room. The next time Zane saw it, he was sitting in a glass-walled chamber that overlooked what he guessed was the ship's core. Two other aliens were with it, now one shorter, with translucent fins along its arms, and the other taller, its skin a dull green with ridged folds where its neck met its shoulders. They watched him with the intensity of surgeons hovering over a strange organ. You introduced a foreign compound into your own body, said the short one. Why? I told the other guy. Zane said, I need it. My body doesn't regulate sugar on its own. You were broken? Not broken, Zane said, just maintained. The tall one leaned closer. You carry your own maintenance fluid? Zane nodded. Yeah, I make sure I don't die. It's a thing we humans do. They conferred among themselves in a series of low, warbling sounds. Zane sat back and let his blood sugar stabilize. The headache was already fading, and the tremble in his hands was easing off. He hated when it happened in front of people, but what choice did he have? The green-skinned one turned back. You will show us. Demonstrate the process again. Zane frowned. I'm not jabbing myself again just for show. We must understand. You are being studied. I'm not a lab rat. You are a guest. Zane narrowed his eyes. Guests don't get locked in glass rooms. There was a pause. Then the feather-skinned alien tapped something on a panel. The glass wall shimmered and faded. The room was open. Very well, it said. You will be shown the vessel. Perhaps you will explain as we observe. The corridors of the ship were wide, curving, and dimly lit by bioluminescent strips that pulsed like jellyfish. Zane followed them through a passage that gradually sloped downward, eventually opening into a vast chamber filled with what looked like holographic representations of alien species. Dozens of beings floated in the air, their images flickering, each accompanied by strings of glyphs Zane couldn't read. You are the first of your kind we have encountered directly, said the finned alien. We have observed from distance. Never this close. Yeah, well, I didn't exactly volunteer. You were not abducted, the green-skinned one said. You were rescued. Your vessel was damaged. Zane stopped walking. My vessel? Yes, a crash. Your shuttle broke apart entering the atmosphere of Yelvan. He remembered then the turbulence, the alarms, the blinding flash. The emergency beacon had failed. He'd blacked out seconds before impact. You saved me, he asked. Yes, said the feathered one. And now you are in our care. Right, Zane muttered. And part of that care is watching me inject myself every few hours. They didn't answer. Instead, they led him to a smaller room lined with instruments. A sleek bed sat in the center, surrounded by mechanical arms and scanning rings. We must understand how your body functions with this. Insulin, said the tall alien. Your biology is anomalous. Not really. Millions of us live with this. Diabetes. Type 1. Self-inflicted? Zane scowled. No, it's autoimmune. My body attacks its own cells. I didn't ask for this. The aliens exchanged another quiet flurry of sounds. Show us your device, said the finned one. Zane pulled the insulin injector from his pouch. It's a pen, a measured dose. Simple tech. Nothing exotic. The feathered alien took it gently, turning it over in its four-fingered hands. This is not weaponized? No. It's medicine. Your kind uses needles on yourselves frequently? When necessary. The green-skinned alien tapped his console. We have prepared a simulation chamber. You will demonstrate your daily routine. Zane stared at them. You want me to live in a fishbowl while you watch? We will not interfere. But we must observe. He sighed. You got a choice of food in there? We have replicated the nutritional content of your shuttle stock. Zane's stomach growled. Fine. But if I go low again, I'm treating it. No debates. Agreed. The simulation chamber was surprisingly accurate. His crash suit, his cot, even his pack of emergency food bars had been replicated with unsettling detail. Over the next few days, Zane lived under constant observation. They watched as he counted carbs, adjusted his dose, and scanned his glucose levels with the backup reader from his kit. He explained it all as best he could. No, I don't feel anything when it hits. That's the point, keep it steady. Yes, I can go unconscious if it drops too fast. No, I won't inject it again unless I eat. The questions were endless. But one evening, just as he was preparing to sleep, a loud alarm echoed through the chamber. The lights dimmed, the walls shuddered, and the floor tilted slightly under his feet. Zane Strayer, came the voice of the feathered alien through the intercom. Remain where you are. We are under threat. He grabbed a bar from his emergency stash and stuffed it into his pocket. What kind of threat? There was no answer. The door to the chamber hissed open. A different alien entered, smaller, bulkier, with armor plates over its shoulders. It looked different from the others. What's going on? Zane asked. The alien didn't speak. It raised its arm, and a net shot out, wrapping around Zane's legs before he could move. He hit the ground hard, forehead smacking the floor. Pain exploded behind his eyes. He gasped, tasting copper in his mouth. The alien reached down, grabbed his injector, and tossed it aside. No, Zane shouted. I need that. The alien didn't care. Everything blurred as he was dragged across the corridor. Behind them, alarms blared louder. The lights flickered. Blood trickled from his brow, and he felt the familiar warning signs, the tremors, the confusion, the cold sweat. His blood sugar was crashing again, and he didn't have his pen. He reached weakly toward the alien's leg. Let me. I need my insulin. Please. The last thing he saw was the floor rushing up to meet him. Zane came to in a narrow compartment that smelled faintly of ozone and something like burnt algae. He was on his side, cheek pressed against a floor that vibrated with the low thrum of movement. His limbs refused to coordinate. His shirt clung to him, damp with cold sweat, and his thoughts slid around like ice cubes on a hot plate. He tried to sit up, but got no farther than a twitch before his shoulder thudded back to the floor. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. A shadow loomed nearby, pacing in clunky, heavy steps. Not the feather-skinned aliens from before. These moved differently, less fluid, more deliberate. One of them grunted, a sound like gravel being chewed. Zane managed a rasp of breath. Need. Sugar. The figures didn't respond. One tapped a panel near the door, and a section of the wall flared with orange light, revealing them more clearly. Armor-plated, squat, with thick limbs and faces like crumpled stone. They didn't belong to the same group that had been studying him earlier. Humans destabilizing, one of them muttered in a tone that suggested neither urgency nor concern. Zane clawed at his thigh, searching for the injector. It wasn't there. They'd stripped it away. His fingers fumbled over the fabric, then scraped the floor in desperation. His vision narrowed into a small tunnel of flickering light. A third alien entered, taller than the others, but built just as broadly. It carried a small canister in one hand and a device that blinked red in the other. Vitals are dropping, it said flatly. Heart rate's erratic. He'll live, the first grunted. They bounce back. That's what they do. Not without glucose. They don't, Zane wheezed, barely audible. The tall one crouched beside him. That's what the fluid was for? Zane gave a weak nod. And food. Can't. Regulate on my own. The alien studied him, then stood and barked something in a language that sounded like metal plates grinding. Another left and returned moments later with a small gel packet. It tore it open and squeezed some of the beige paste into Zane's mouth. The taste was revolting like mashed lentils and battery acid, but it was sugar-rich, and his body didn't care about flavor. Within a minute, the fog in his head began to lift. His hands stopped shaking. He managed to push himself onto one elbow, then slumped against the wall. "That's better," he mumbled, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Next time, maybe don't kidnap the guy with the broken pancreas." The tall alien tapped its device again. "You are a priority asset. We needed leverage." Zane blinked at it. Leverage for what? The door hissed open, revealing a corridor with sharp angles and walls that pulsed with red veins of light. The ship was nothing like the previous one, more aggressive in design, less serene. He was marched down the hall, flanked by two of the armored aliens, into a chamber filled with consoles and flickering projections. A female of their species stood near the center, draped in a garment that looked ceremonial, a robe of dark fibers threaded with glowing nodes. Her expression was unreadable. "So this is it," she said, circling him. "The adaptable one." "I'm just a man with a medical condition," he muttered. "No. You are a biological paradox. A fragile organism that cheats death with chemical precision. You shouldn't be able to function. But you do." Zane shrugged. "I like to think of myself as stubborn." She studied him, then turned to a holographic display. "The others refuse to weaponize organic modification. They call it inhumane. But we see potential. You are proof." "I'm not a proof," Zane said. "I'm a guy who needs snacks and shots to stay alive." "Exactly," she said. "And yet you survive. On a hostile moon. Without native sustenance. With your body attacking itself. And still you lived longer than any of our previous subjects." His pulse quickened. "Previous?" She didn't answer. Instead, she gestured to a console. A projection shimmered to life, showing a series of alien species in containment. Some were still. Others twitched weakly. None looked healthy. "We collect for analysis. Only one has adapted without assistance. You." "That's not adaptation," Zane snapped. "It's maintenance. There's a difference. You make do with tools your body lacks," she said. "That's resilience. That's what we want." Zane folded his arms, still unsteady on his feet. "So what? You're going to dissect me for answers?" "We require demonstration. Controlled exposure. Observation of thresholds." He took a step back. "You want to stress test me like I'm a machine? If you survive, it confirms viability." Zane laughed once, bitterly. "That's not science. That's torture." She turned to one of the guards, who tapped a command into his console. A section of the floor lowered, revealing a chamber below filled with shifting fog and strange flora. "You will be placed in the acclimation environment. No insulin. No dietary provisions. We will monitor your biological decay and determine intervention points." "You're out of your minds." She ignored him. The guards moved forward. Zane darted to the side, grabbing a loose conduit from the wall. He swung it hard, catching one of them in the shoulder. The alien staggered but didn't fall. A second tried to grab him, and Zane ducked, rolling under a console. He scrambled up, hands slapping at buttons he didn't understand. One of them triggered a burst of static across the chamber, making the aliens flinch. "Stop him," the female barked. Zane yanked open a panel and dove through. He sprinted into the corridor, lungs burning, legs still rubbery. Alarms blared. Red light strobed across the walls. He took a sharp turn and found himself in a storage bay. Crates lined the walls, some open, revealing tools, equipment, and miraculously a medical kit labeled in standard. He tore it open. Inside was a universal injector and a vial of clear fluid. He scanned the label. Glucose solution. It wasn't insulin, but it would buy him time. He jabbed it into his thigh. Relief washed over him like a wave. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. He grabbed a wrench from a nearby crate and crouched behind the door. As the first alien entered, Zane swung hard, catching it in the knee. It dropped with a grunt. The others hesitated. "Don't make me get creative," Zane growled. "I've had a bad day." "You won't escape," one said. "Wasn't planning to," Zane said. "I'm just buying time." They lunged. He threw the wrench, then dove behind a crate. A bolt of energy scorched the wall where his head had been. Then, unexpectedly, the floor jolted. The lights flickered. A distant explosion rocked the ship. "What was that?" One of the aliens barked. Zane peeked out. "Guess your other prisoners aren't as passive as you thought." Another tremor. This one stronger. A voice crackled over the intercom in their language, panicked and urgent. The guards turned and ran. Zane stood slowly, catching his breath. His heart was still racing, but the glucose was keeping him upright. He grabbed another vial from the kit and stashed it in his pocket. He needed to find a way out. Through a narrow corridor, he found what looked like a docking bay. A small transport pod sat idle, hatch open. He bolted toward it, slid inside, and started flipping switches at random. The console lit up. The pod hummed. Another explosion shook the bay. Zane grinned. "Let's see how much of this you left unlocked." The pod lifted. The docking clamps disengaged. With a lurch, it shot out into space. Zane slumped into the seat, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a drum. He was alive. Again. Barely. He looked down at the injector in his hand. "Just insulin," he muttered, then laughed softly. Nothing exotic. The escape pod rattled like a shopping cart on a freeway. Zane sat hunched in the pilot's seat, clutching the armrests, sweat streaking down his temples. The pod's control panel blinked with warnings and symbols he couldn't read, but the trajectory held steady. Stars smeared past the viewport. He had no idea where it was taking him. A sharp jolt knocked his shoulder into the bulkhead. He winced, then leaned over the console and banged a fist against the flashing panel. "Come on, toaster oven. Just get me somewhere that isn't full of overly curious squid people or walking riot police." The pod lurched again and abruptly slowed. Through the viewport, a massive vessel loomed sleek, dark, and shaped more like a crescent blade than any ship he'd seen before. It dwarfed the pod completely. A docking arm extended toward him, its end glowing with a pale lavender aura. "Guess we're committed." The pod was caught in the field and drawn in with a mechanical hiss. The airlock sealed behind him, and the docking tube retracted. He stood slowly, knees still uncooperative, and grabbed the emergency glucose vial from his vest to take a quick swig. It tasted like syrup and regret, but it kept his legs moving. The hatch opened. He braced himself for another squad of armored guards, or worse, another lecture about being a fragile paradox. Instead, he was greeted by a single alien. It was short, barely came up to his chest. Its skin was a soft green, like oxidized copper, and its eyes were vertical slits that blinked independently. A tool belt hung around its waist, cluttered with strange instruments. "You look terrible," it said. Zane blinked. "You speak standard?" "Not well, but enough to tell when someone's about to faint in my airlock." "You need medical?" "Already handled," he said, shaking the empty vial. "I keep a spare pancreas in my pocket." The alien tilted its head. "That joke doesn't translate." "I'm used to that." It motioned for him to follow. "You're on a salvage vessel. We picked up your escape pod signal. You're lucky. Those old pods usually dump into a debris stream." Zane rubbed his shoulder. "Not my finest hour." They walked through dim corridors that smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant. The walls were lined with storage lockers and what looked like half-disassembled drones. "I'm Tannic," the alien said. "Engineer." "You." "Zane." "Diabetic." "Frequent flyer." "Human. Last I checked." Tannic led him into a small compartment set with a half-circle bench and a table covered in tools. "You're going to need more than sugar packets if you're planning to stay alive out here," Tannic said, rummaging through a drawer. "What did they take from you?" "My insulin pen. Had a couple doses left." Tannic handed him a tablet. "Input your compound specs. We've got a molecular printer. Might not be pretty, but it'll keep your blood from turning into jelly." Zane tapped in the formula from memory. He'd had to do it once, back when his medkit got drowned during a flood response mission. This wasn't so different. Just higher stakes. The printer hummed to life in the corner, slowly extruding a small cartridge. "You're not the first human I've heard of," Tannic said. "But you're the first one I've seen who survived a Mark Kin raid. They wanted to watch me fall apart. They got impatient." Tannic's eyes narrowed. "They took others?" "Yeah, and not all of them got their sugar fix in time." The printer dinged softly. Zane grabbed the cartridge, loaded it into the makeshift injector, and jabbed it into his thigh without ceremony. Tannic's eyes widened. "You just stabbed yourself like that? Would you rather I melted into a coma on your floor?" "Right. No. Do that as often as you like." Zane sat back and exhaled. "Okay. I'm stable. For now." Tannic leaned on the table. "You got somewhere to go?" He glanced around. "Not anymore." "Then you've got two choices," Tannic said. "We can drop you at the next outpost and hope they don't mind organics with irregular maintenance schedules. Or you stay on and pull your weight." "What, like?" "Crew. Salvage crew," Tannic corrected. We clean up what others leave behind. You've already proven you can function under duress and improvise medical care under fire. That's more than I can say for the last 3 volunteers. Zane raised an eyebrow. What happened to them? One suffocated. One panicked and ejected himself into a vacuum corridor. One tried to eat the battery pack. That last one wasn't human, was it? No. It was a Grallian. They think anything warm is food. Zane stood. Fine. I'll earn my bunk. But if I go low in the middle of a job, I'm treating it first. No arguments. Tannic nodded. Deal. But you solder your own medical pouches. I'm not sterilizing anything after you. Later that cycle, after a meal that tasted vaguely like fried kelp and chalk, Zane joined Tannic in the loading bay. A twisted wreck of a shuttle floated outside, tethered by magnetic grapples. Derelict, Tannic said. No life signs. Looks like it was hit by a plasma burst. You up for a walk? Zane flexed his fingers. As long as I've got my pen and a snack bar, I'm invincible. They suited up. Tannic's suit was a compact, shell-like exosuit. Zane's was a patched-together pressure suit 2 sizes too big, sealed with what looked like industrial tape. I've worn worse, he muttered as he checked his oxygen levels. They exited into the void, drifting over to the shattered hull. The front end of the shuttle was gone entirely, like it had been bitten off. Zane floated inside behind Tannic, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Check the compartments, Tannic said. Anything usable, tag it for retrieval. Zane nodded, drifting through what used to be a galley. A half-melted ration dispenser hung from the wall. He opened a storage locker and found a sealed med pack. The label was faded, but he recognized the symbol for emergency glucose. Hey, jackpot, he called. Found sugar gel. Tannic floated over. Still sealed. Yeah, might be expired, but in a pinch. Bring it. Could save your life later. They moved to the rear, where the cargo hold looked intact. Inside, several crates floated loose. Tannic opened one and let out a low whistle. Circuit cores. Unregistered. This hull just paid for your room. Zane peered inside. So I'm valuable now? You're a walking liability with a side job in treasure hunting. They returned to the ship, crates in tow. After docking, Zane peeled off his suit and sat on the bench, breathing hard. Tannic passed him a water pouch. You did good. I'm not dead. That's my bar these days. High standards. Zane leaned back and looked around the cluttered room, the flickering lights, the faint hum of recycling systems barely holding together. You sure you want a fragile biological on your ship? Tannic shrugged. You keep injecting mystery juice and surviving. That's not fragility. That's efficiency. Zane chuckled. It's just insulin. Tannic blinked. Still doesn't translate. They both sat there for a moment, the ship humming around them, cargo secured, and no alarms blaring for once. Zane sighed and finally relaxed. Guess I'll start labeling my snacks.